Hello everybody, welcome to the Taurus Root Academy. We are going to do sort of a medical astrology Astro-Herbal primer video here, and we're going to focus on the natal chart and the aspects of the natal chart. And we're going to first kind of go macro, back up to the idea of the ether here, and the idea of a pulse in the ether. And please keep up with me and check out, I'll have a big long video analyzing the nature of the pulse and how that's symbolic of so many things and how it's encoded in the language. And but for now, the idea that there is a pulse in the ether which creates planets, but then those planets then create all manifestation below that level. So these are levels of manifestation down into the physical. So the seed here is synonymous with the pulse, especially in this whole astro-herbal perspective of things. The seed creates the plant, and it's the pulse that creates the planets. You see the plants connection there with the phonetics. It's the potential. So this pulse could also be considered like a tone or a note, a very specific. Each pulse, not all pulses are equal. They all have very specific qualities which determine the nature of the wave that then proceeds from there. And it's the same with the seed. There's an inherent potential within the seed, and it's there. It is. And depending upon the elements within which that pulse exists or that seed exists determines sort of the how easily it grows and reproduces and how difficult of a time it has in that process. Some seeds are born or are germinated just at the right time, and all of the weather and the climate and the local habitat is just right to support it, and it flourishes very, very easily without much struggle. Whereas some seeds germinate at the absolute most inopportune time, and they're dealing with frosts and potentially never sprout at all. And there are all sorts of variations in between that, and that is, that's the science of astrology, how it plays on plants, but it's really the way it plays out with humans too. We are seeds, so to speak, and our birth chart is the map of that seed. It determines the qualities inherent within that specific seed, and depending upon the environment with which that seed takes root and starts to grow is going to determine how easily or dis-easily that seed will be able to express to its full potential or not. And the more it's able to express its full potential, the more it's able to find physical vitality and health and well-being. And the more difficult time that expression has expressing, or that a seed has expressing, the more difficult that is for them due to their environment, the more dis-ease and dysfunction and strife in general will become of their existence. But this is all the study of alchemy, which is becoming conscious of these things and being able to initiate change based on consciousness of these patterns and these natural tendencies. But not being aware of this it doesn't make you a victim. This is just nature. But becoming conscious of these different layers of how nature operates than you've ever looked at gives you tools that you never imagined you could have. The astrology is this fascinating tool for not only medical astrology, but just for your relationship with existence as a whole. I think this is a phenomenal study to be engaging in. So I think one of the main things to think about when, we're going to get into looking at this, and this is kind of looks like a blob of colors, but we're going to imagine that as an astrological chart in a wheel here in a second. And one of the main things to understand is that it's the planets that are the impulses. And we as individuals are, this is the ether in Greek metaphysics. This would be like the agathon, and the pulse creates the aoristos, which is the infinite duality. And from that infinite duality comes the infinite manifestations of that. But these planets become these aspects of that infinite duality, creating all this further division. And it's the planets that are the actors, the impulses, which influence life, both on like a personal level, how we were forged, so to speak, the moment in time that we were born. All of the relationships of the heavens forges us into like a reflection of that, a physical, materialized expression of that one energetic moment in time. But it's where the planets are the real like animators of that. And we've just become simply mediums of that. We become sort of a channel of that moment in time, and we're a channel of how those planets were trying to express as individuals, but also as a whole in relation to all the other planets in the chart. And so there's this very unique, it's the endless qualities of uniqueness that make everybody unique, and that's part of it, is that all these planets were at different angular relationships with each other in each one of us when we were born. And the distinction is important because people tend to think of themselves as their sign. I'm an Aries, I'm a Taurus, I'm a Gemini. But what they're talking about typically is their sun, is that the sun was in Aries, Taurus, or Gemini when they were born. And so they tend to think of themselves in terms of these signs, but the signs are really just fields through which the impulses are acting. And the thing is we're so much more than simply the sun. We have all of these lights in the sky, the 7 wandering stars. These are the 7 visible ones that we can see with the naked eye, but they're outer planets and asteroids. They're all lights in the sky that are all creating pulses in the ether, which have influence on every other aspect. Each one of these is affecting each other always. Right now in the sky, there's an angular relationship between all of those planets, strengthening or weakening and modifying and neutralizing. They have all these, depending on where they are and what sign they're in and which planets they are. This is the whole weather of the energy of life, boils down to the angular relationships of the planets and where they relate to where they are in the signs and zodiac. Now, the signs, we got into this in the last video, the last Astro-Herbal primer, these principles of polarity, modality, and element. And these are all emanations of the ether. And so this wave that the planets are creating, these planets are nodal points for these pulses. And they create waves, and these waves have qualities of polarity, modality, and element to them. It's part of the aoristos of the Greeks. So, the polarity of positive and negative, and the modality of cardinal, fixed, and mutable, and then the elements of fire, earth, air, and water become the qualities which define each of these signs of the zodiac. So you can read a lot about Aries as far as the specific qualities that an Arian might have, fiery and competitive, and leadership qualities, potentially combative. But all those words are really doing is describing an expression of positive cardinal fire, because that's what Aries is. Over here we've got positive cardinal fire. Aries is the most yang positive sign in the zodiac. And so those are the types of words you're going to hear in describing the character of an Aries. But it's not just because the Aries is the Aries and that's what it is. It's born out of these three conditions is what makes an Aries. This is primary, this is secondary. And when you go around, you'll see that each of these has a different combination of polarity, modality, and element. You can see positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, all the way around. And there's that rhythm, that yin-yang sort of rhythm going throughout the year. And like the fractal of that, this is the positive and this is the negative. There's everything is fractalized. So with the modality, we've got cardinal, fixed, and mutable, and these are the seasons. So we've got Aries, Taurus, Gemini. This is the spring season, cardinal, fixed, mutable. Summer, cardinal, fixed, mutable, cardinal, fixed, mutable, cardinal, fixed, mutable. Those are the 4 seasons of the zodiac. And the elements, we've got the same: fire, earth, air, water. Fire, earth, air, water. Fire, earth, air, water. And so you can take any one of these signs, take Virgo here, we've got negative, mutable, earth. And so when you start reading about the qualities of the Virgo, you're going to start finding that these are the qualities that are really being described. It's fleshing out what it means to have a combination of those 3 energies together is what it means to be a Virgo. So wrapping your mind around these principles is really, really key head start, because there's fewer principles to learn, and these principles are easier to learn than it is to memorize each one of these signs and every little characteristic that's supposed to go around. Because once you learn about the cardinal energy, you're learning about Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn simultaneously, because they all share that quality. And it's the same for all of this. And the more you study principle, I think, is the quicker you're going to have a clearer understanding of how all of this functions. So the idea that these signs have these qualities now, I'll do a quick run through of these planets, but in the last video we went into it a little bit further. But the sun is a hot and dry planet, and the moon is cold and wet. Mercury is neutral and tense, and I have a little update potential to the Venus one. So in the last video I just considered it cold and wet, which is what it classically has been considered, as a cold and wet planet. But I have heard arguments that Venus can also potentially be warm, and I see some validity to that. The idea that Venus is sort of attraction, and sometimes we're attracted to things that raise our energy, and sometimes we're attracted to things that lower our energy. But it's definitely a wet planet, and although it's not really, tension and relaxation isn't something that was considered necessarily in classical medical astrology and energetics, but it's become much more common, and I think it's an important distinction to make, and qualities to be included in this whole equation. But Venus is a very relaxed planet, and I think potentially its relaxed quality is what might give it the fluctuation between hot and cold. It might be the relaxed quality that gives it that fluctuation and that flexibility. So Mars is hot and dry, Jupiter hot and wet, Saturn is cold and dry. And so my quickest analogy, as I shared in the other video, is hot raises energy and cold brings things to rest. And dry separates things out and wet brings things together. And you can kind of think about that in all sorts of physical, spiritual, emotional, mental, all sorts of different ways of separation and bringing together as far as dry and wet goes, and all sorts of ways of animating or de-animating, I suppose, with hot and cold. And then I think tension and relaxation is something that we're all familiar enough that doesn't really need explanation. But Mercury is this neutral planet as far as temperature goes. And I chose some key words for these planets. And so I think it's important to really start thinking about the fact that you are all of these. You are these planets. We are all expressions of the ether, and this is how the ether expresses everything. Humans, plants, minerals, everything is an expression of these planetary impulses. And so keywords that I chose here is the sun creates. It's our creative willpower and aspiration. The moon nurtures. It's the typical sort of mother archetype. Mercury informs. It's the communicator. Venus loves. Like I was saying before, it's attraction, and it's that moist love principle. Bring things together. Universal kind of a love. And then Mars acts. Mars is not a planet of consideration. Mars is a doer and very impulsive. It's the most impulsive planet, and so its keyword is acts. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, and Saturn is the planet of contraction. So those two have a very important relationship in the influence of life, and Jupiter being hot and moist, and like that's kind of that's what's necessary for life. Life needs heat and moisture, or there is no life. And when things get cold and dry out, they die. So it's sort of the life and death principle in there, but every other aspect of expansion and contraction isn't necessarily a bad thing, and expansion isn't necessarily a good thing. But those are the principles that they operate under. And now you can start to think about how, we'll just talk about the sun quick, how the sun is going to function in different signs. So the sun is a hot and dry, creative planet. It wants to be very yang and burn energy and be a creator, be a leader. There's a lot of leadership qualities with the sun. So when the sun is in Aries, in classical astrology, the sun is considered to be exalted or in a very strong position, in its strongest position in Aries. And why that would be is because Aries is a positive cardinal fire sign. So all this very yang qualities to that sign means that when the sun is in that sign, it gets to really be itself. It's the hot and dryness resonates perfectly, and it gets to function exactly how it most naturally is inclined to function. So now you take that same hot and dry planet and you put it in Taurus, the next sign, and you've got a negative fixed earth sign, and all that is it's all very Saturn. That's all very contraction type of an energy. It's very yin, very reserved, very considered, and the sun just wants to kind of express, and the Taurus, that type of energy, that earth, very grounded. Let's bring the energy down, and the fixed, let's really like settle this energy and get it into a settled, stable pattern. And in the negative aspect, or the yin aspect of Taurus, is very shy and reserved, and the sun is just the opposite of that. It's this giant, look at me, look at me, look at me. And so someone born with their sun in Aries is going to have a very different experience in relation to their creative energy than somebody with the sun in Taurus. It doesn't mean that one's better than the other at all for any of these things. The sun in Aries is going to have a lot less potential to create disease for that individual, though, probably. It depends on all sorts of other aspects of the chart, but naturally, somebody whose sun is in Aries rarely has, when we think about ourselves as these, like portal or medium through which these planets are trying to express, if we can't express them, that energy gets bottled up in the physical structure of the body, as opposed to flowing naturally through. That's the idea of dis-ease. And so somebody whose sun is in Aries, that sun just flows very naturally, and it very rarely has a chance to bottle up, unless, of course, there's other dynamics in the chart. But with Taurus, it's the Taurus is kind of bottled up by nature. That energy, the fixed, the earth, the negative qualities, those are sort of bottled up kind of qualities. And so the sun, although there's no reason it can't express in a perfectly healthy way in Taurus, it's far more inclined to have a struggle with that. And so the idea that a Taurian might have more issues with their sun expression creating disease is due to those qualities. It's due to these factors. And that's where you get to having planets in stronger and weaker positions just by which sign that they're in. Each one of these planets has a different sign, different signs that they function more naturally in, and certain signs where they just really have a difficult time functioning in a natural way that they are more likely inclined to. Like Mars wants to act. The Taurus is again a difficult place for Mars, but Mars is the natural ruler of Aries. Very easy for Mars to express. Just yang, 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 I'll just act. Whereas Venus rules Taurus. So Venus in this cold and relaxed and wet state does quite naturally in Taurus. It's very yin. But you put Venus in Aries and it's very hard for Venus to relax there. Aries is hot and fire and cardinal and active. So there's a whole chart of all of these planets and everybody's got a very, very unique combination of all of that going on. So it's important to think that we're far, far more than our sun. It's important to understand. And now, so the sun, the planets are the acting principles, and the signs modify how those impulses are able to manifest, how naturally or how much resistance there is, and what type of resistance there would be to that expression. And now the houses become the very specific area of life in which that energy gets focused. And the houses are based upon the time of birth. And so that's why it's so helpful and important to know the time of birth. It really, really is worth digging up if you have to do some digging to find the time. So let's take just a quick look at this, and we're gonna think about this as a natal chart. And in a natal chart, you sort of live in the center, and this is the perspective of the heavens around you. I know this doesn't look like a natal chart, but with your imagination, this over here, the east, this whole wheel is spinning this way. And this is what was rising in the east at the moment of your birth. And we're just gonna, a little later, we're gonna pretend the sun was rising right here. So let's imagine you were born at sunrise. The sun's gonna be rising in the east when you were born. Up at the highest point in the sky, it's gonna be to the south when you were born. Planets up here are gonna be up here. Planets that are just setting to the west are gonna be over here. And then the planets lowest in the sky behind are gonna be to the north. And this is from the northern hemisphere perspective. So this becomes the first house, and this becomes second, third. I don't know if you can see it. I have it written in here real small, but there's first, sixth, eighth, and 12th, and we'll get into that with those are the specific houses of disease. But this whole wheel has first house, second house, third house, etc. Each have very specific areas of life where that energy gets focused. And the first house gets very much focused on the self and the image and how the world sees the self. The second house has to do with resources and values, and the third house is learning and siblings, and there are all these sort of sometimes there's very mundane attributes to them, like siblings and primary school, and some people take this to the nth degree of I don't even know, like typewriters might fit into one of these. I don't know, people go crazy with some of this stuff, but stay away from the too crazy specific and try to stick with principles. The fourth is going to be family and the homeland. Fifth is children and love, and sixth is daily habits and routine. And so people have different focuses in their life based on where their planets line up in this chart. And so people who have a lot of planets in their first house are going to have a lot more attention given to their appearance and how other people see them. Some people really just don't care how other people see them. And some people are far more sensitive and aware and just focused on that. You know, the fourth house being home, some people have a lot of planets down here and they're really, home life is their whole life. And then some people have a lot of planets up here in what would be the 10th house, which is the house of career. And so some people are just very, very career focused with all of their energy in life. So the houses become the next layer of what makes us all so unique. And that's, you know, that's why it's based on a moment in time. When we get deeper into, we'll talk about transits, which is the relationship of the natal chart to where the planets are in real time. You can start seeing how this time of birth, why even twins are totally different people. Like, every little minute makes a huge difference in the way this all unfolds over time. So a note on houses, there are many different house systems. And so there's many different ways to divide the sky into pieces, it turns out. And that's based upon theoretical shapes of the earth, essentially. And everybody has, there are many different sort of, I guess, mathematical equations given to try to determine where it's kind of a long, convoluted thing. Google into house systems and you'll find a whole lot of like arguments amongst astrologers for one. But when you go, the further back in time you go, the more you're going to find people using a whole sign house system, especially in medical astrology. And even in modern times, medical astrologers tend to unanimously stick with whole sign houses because it's effective. And because it seems to, I don't want to say one's right or wrong, but on a physical level, I think this one is going to work a lot better for most people. And I highly recommend using the whole sign house system. And what that means is, if the sign of Aries was rising in the east when you were born, then the whole sign of Aries is your whole first house. And it really kind of simplifies what is otherwise a giant complex mess of various house systems. So that noted, in medical astrology, there are sort of four main houses considered to be the most important in relation to disease. And the first house is related to your natal constitution, and the first house relates to the physical body, and you know, your body type, body size, shape, structure, appearance, everything that has to do with the very physical aspect of you when you were born is related to the first house. And so some people were born with a lot of strengths in their first house medically, and some people were born with a lot of weaknesses in their first house medically, and everything in between. And so everybody sort of has this inherent potential for, I guess, weakness or strength based on the first house. Now, the sixth house is the house of habits and routines, and that's sort of the traditional house of disease. And it's kind of, when we get into talking about this is the easiest to point at. Like, if you have a disease because you eat horribly, it's really easy to understand the nature of your disease. And you're going to find that these habits that are creating disease, that are going to be happening from the sixth house, because because that's the nature of routine and pattern. We're products of our patterns and our cycles, and if we have poor cycles and patterns and habits, then we're going to have dis-ease as a result of that. And the sixth house tends to be the easiest diagnosing house as far as looking at disease. The eighth house is more karmic, and that's getting a lot more subtle, and I think it's, so the idea of it potentially being karmic from previous lives, but also karmic from within this life, And I think it has a lot to do with just relationships with others in general, and power struggles, and how we've secrecy or not secrecy involved in those power struggles. And it's the Scorpio house. So it's like this, the house of the hidden and the sort of dark and the deep stuff. And I think a lot of those maybe for some people are more obvious, and I think for some people they're probably a lot less obvious, because it can be so subtle and people don't really understand their that they may have created negative karma without really realizing it. Then the 12th house is sort of the most difficult to sort of grasp, the idea of it being existential. So all the first 11 houses have to do with areas of life here in this world. All very tangible in their own way, whereas the 12th house it's sort of the spiritual house. It's the pondering of the afterlife and the relationship with creation and sort of that meditative realm. And so some people have a lot of planets in their 12th house. And so all of that energy is getting focused in this sort of very spiritual direction, and it becomes very hard to get traction, and because they still have to pay bills, the world is still demanding things from them that they're not very inclined to be producing for themselves. And so a lot of people with a lot of 12th house energy could potentially wind up in like monasteries and places of seclusion where they can really focus on the quietude of life and the contemplative, reflective, meditative sort of nature of things, because it's very difficult to be doing that while also working the 9 to 5 and shuffling a bunch of kids around and trying to keep up with, everything else, and having a social life and all those other things that are a part of all of this. That when your energy isn't focused there, it's all about having to deal with existence. Because you're not really in that realm. You're between worlds in the 12th house, and so that becomes even more subtle as far as the sources of disease that come with the 12th house. But I think it's a general hypersensitivity, because your body becomes just more ethereal in a sense, and I think that chemicals become more of an issue. Just your sensitivity to like mold and mysterious kind of things you can't necessarily see tend to come from the 12th house. So I think that's about it for the houses on this. We'll get further into that in some other videos and flesh out all of the houses. And then the last thing, I guess, the major thing to do with a natal chart are the angles, or the aspects. And that's you'll look at a chart and you'll see all these lines going across, connecting planets to each other, and it looks like this really confusing mess. But all of those have their meaning and their purpose, and they're illustrating relationship is what they're doing. And they're pointing out that there's relationships between planets when they draw lines between them. And what those relationships are, they're either major aspects or we have minor aspects over here, but most of the time, unless you have a more of a fancier computer program with astrology and whatnot, or you get a little deeper into it, most of them are just going to sort of put the major aspects when they print your chart out. And so we'll get into what these are. So going back to the idea that the sun was right there on the horizon when you were born. So I'm going to do a dual symbolism here. I have the sun, this is the sun symbol here, but we're also going to pretend this is a 0, and this is the degree mark. So it's 0 degrees of Aries. We're gonna pretend that the sun was at the 0 degrees of Aries when this birth chart happened. And now, when there's another planet right there at 0 degrees of Aries, like let's say there was a new moon and the moon was right here, right next to the sun, there would be 0 degrees of separation between them, and that would be called a conjunction. So the moon would be conjunct the sun on a new moon. Now, let's say the moon was, it's gonna be like 5 days later, so like, going back, this wheel is 12 divisions of 30 degrees each to get your 360 degrees of a circle. And so 60 degrees, the sextile, 60 sextile, is going to be 60 degrees. 30 plus 30 is 60. And we've got the sextile symbol here. And we've got the square down at 90 degrees. And you can see there's a square to go down to there. And then we've got the 120, we've got the triangle, and the 180 is the opposition. So those relationships have qualities to them. Even the relationships themselves have qualities, and there's reasons for that, and it goes back again to these principles. And so when planets are conjunct each other, they're considered to sort of combine their forces into one sort of unified pulse. And it's really a moment of a combination, a blending of two energies. And sometimes, depending on which planets they are and which sign they're on, one of them's going to be a lot stronger than the other. And the one might kind of squash out the other one. Or maybe they're more harmonious and they're in a harmonious sign and they can really, really produce a lot together and be very, very beneficial as a sort of the sum of their parts is greater, or the together they're greater than the sum of their parts, I think is the saying. But that next level of 60 degrees, we're going to see that Aries is 60 degrees from Gemini. So 0 degrees Aries is 60 degrees from 0 degrees Gemini. And you're going to see that sextiles are described as favorable angles with lots of potential, and the idea that two planets that are 60 degrees away from each other, that's somehow a beneficial situation is due to the fact that any planets that are 60 degrees away from each other are going to share the same polarity. So it's going to be planets in positive signs making a relationship with each other. So that's already a benefit because they're trying to function in a similar way. They're yang. One's not trying to be inward and one's trying to be outward. They're both functioning in an outward expression, so it's easier to work together. And then the next level is that one is cardinal and one is mutable. Cardinal is very leadership qualities. Immutable is very adaptable qualities. And so the planet here gets to be the natural leader, and then this planet here has direction. There's a cardinal planet giving it direction to follow, and they get to both fulfill their roles without creating friction. And I'll talk about how that friction between different modalities can play out when we get to the square here. But then the next level is that it's fire and air here. And I think part of that is both that fire and air signs are all, the positive signs are all fire and air, but like just on a physical level, when you build a fire, you need air, and if you want to build a fire beyond wood, you also need to keep giving it oxygen and air. And so there's a natural, the air feeds the fire, and there's a very natural relationship, kind of like earth and water. Earth holds water, and they have a very natural relationship with each other. So earth and water signs are always going to be sextile to each other. The next one we're going to talk about is the square, and that tends to be potentially the most frictional. And the reason why these tend to be frictional and the oppositions also tend to be frictional is you'll see that every opposition and square shares the same modality. So if you make little squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's your cardinal square, here's your fixed square, and then here's your mutable square. So they're opposite and square to each other. And the reason why that's considered frictional is because, two planets in cardinal signs making angles with each other, trying to work harmoniously, but they're both trying to be the leader. but the nature of leadership is only one gets to be the leader. And so that creates friction, and it makes it a much more difficult relationship for those planets to express through us. Because ideally all of these planets can be expressing consistently all the time. But when you've got a square between cardinal signs, one's going to have to let the other lead, and then they're going to have to be a little bit of a back and forth, and it gets to be a little bit more of a complicated process trying to express all of these energies. And we all have complications in our chart. Everybody's got a unique chart, and everybody's got their challenges. Squares are one of them. So with fixed signs, fixed squares and oppositions, the fixed energy is very stubborn and unchangeable and unmovable. So you've got two immovable forces that are already there is an inertia, they already have a momentum of their own, but neither is really willing to change that. And so that's the friction in a fixed square. It's the idea that nobody's willing to budge, everybody's stubborn. So that creates friction and tension. And then with the mutable square in opposition, the mutable is just sort of the very adaptable, very changeable, mutatable sign, and it doesn't have all of the initiatory qualities of the cardinal, and it doesn't have all the stabilizing qualities of the fixed signs. It's adapting to prepare for the next. And those energies, when they're square and opposite to each other, they tend to not be able to, it's kind of like spinning the wheels. It's like there's no direction, nobody's telling anybody where to go, there's not a whole lot of momentum, there's sometimes a lot of inactivity can happen with mutable squares. So that's kind of the nature of that. We'll quickly touch on the trine. The trine is considered the most favorable of all of the angles, and that's because you'll find that there's triangles. Look on this outer wheel, red, red, red. We've got this big fire triangle. We've got this big earth triangle, water triangle. Now we've got the air triangle. So trines are always going to be making angles with planets that are also in the same element. And planets that are in the same element are automatically in the same polarity. And so those are the most naturally fluid expressions of planets making aspects or angular relationships with each other. And now there are many, many, many more divisions of the zodiac and aspects you can make. And so minor aspects to be considered, there's semi-sextile, and then the inconjunction, or the quincunx is another word for inconjunction. So it's like the 30 and the 150 degrees. So this would be here and here would be the two inconjunctions, the two semi-sextiles, right? So that's half of a sextile, semi-sextile, and then the inconjunctions are 150. So this is 180, so this is going to be 150 on this side, and 150 or 210, depending on which way you're going around on that side. Those are going to be the inconjunctions. But then there's semi-squares, so this is half of a square is going to be in the middle of Taurus in this one. But then you can divide this not only in 12, but you can divide the zodiac into 5s or 7s or really any other number. So if you look into Jyotish astrology and the concept of Vargas and divisional charts, they divide this into all sorts of different quantities beyond just the 12 divisions. And it's fascinating the fractal nature of the zodiac and how much insight can be gleaned from it. But that's kind of the quickest intro I can give you. It's realizing the planets are the characters, the actors, and the signs are the modifiers, and the houses are the areas of focus, and the angles are based upon. That one's a little bit more interesting as far as why does it matter whether planets are making an angle with each other, and that's more into sort of the mystery of the geometry of nature. But the more you study astrology, the more you find that there's tension at squares. That's just sort of an undeniable fact. I can't fully explain it other than what I've explained to you with sharing. Squares always share the same modality, but all of these other ones all have subtle there's a reason why every angle matters and why each one has its influence. And there's also a reason why these are considered the major aspects and why these tend to have even more profound influence. But yeah, that's the long and short of sort of looking at the natal chart. And we'll start looking more at natal charts in the future. And we'll start looking more at planets as individual things and flesh all of this stuff out more individually. But here's your quick intro into looking at a natal chart. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks everybody, and take care.